Hi, I'm Joe Harroz, President of the University of Oklahoma. I want to welcome you to our Conversations with the President. This platform gives me the chance to talk to some of the great people who make OU so special. Make sure you're subscribed to Conversations with the President, and you'll be the first to know when new episodes are released. Let's get started. Welcome to the show. We've got a special episode lined up today, but before we bring in our guest, it's that time. It's time for Hey Harroz.
Hey Harroz.
As always, we've brought great questions to the table. We've chosen two today that really stood out. Appreciate all of your questions. Our first question was from Evan, an OU student, and Evan asks, what was your biggest inspiration growing up besides your parents and why? Evan was prescient. My parents are my heroes, and mom is still with us. Dad passed. But in terms of biggest inspirations, I'd say I went to Putnam City North High School in Oklahoma City, and 3 years my senior is a woman named Beth Garrett. And Beth Garrett at our high school won the National Debate Championship. She then went to OU undergrad, UVA law, clerked for Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. I had the chance to work with her in the office of Senator David Bourne, became best of friends, and then she went on and became the first female president at Cornell University. But watching her succeed and have the National Debate Championship in high school, to me, I realized that anyone could do anything, although I later learned she was simply just better than me. The second question is from an OU parent. Always good to hear from the OU parents. It's Andrea who writes with this question. As an out-of-state family, visiting your campus community is impressive and welcoming. Are you finding more students from outside of the normal regions? Great question, Andrea. We are. I was just sharing earlier today, OU's freshman class has been up 10% of each of the last 3 years, so we're growing in huge ways. The expansion has been the Southeastern Conference schools that weren't as engaged before and now are. California, obviously, so 40% of our students come from Texas, so Texas is always there, and that's growing. But those that you wouldn't ordinarily think about, California, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, and Illinois, and we have a lot more interest from there. So thanks a lot for your questions. And now let's move to today's episode. And we're here to discuss really number one in the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech. And we have Freedom of Speech Week every year. It's our fifth year to celebrate this this week. And in this observance, and as we reaffirm our commitment to the Constitution and to freedom of expression, we wanted to bring in a really interesting guest, and that's who we have with us today. I want to read you some of his bio. His name is Dr. Wilfred McClay. He is the Victor Davis Hanson Chair in Classical History and Western Civilization at Hillsdale College, but he's actually one of our own. Prior to that time, when he went there in 2021, he spent the prior 8 years as the GT and Libby Blankenship Chair in the History of Liberty at OU, and the director of the Center for the History of Liberty, following Rufus Fears and preceding Kyle Harper in that role. Unbelievably accomplished author. One of his books, The Masterless Self and Society in Modern America, received the 1995 Merle Curdy Award for of the Organization of American Historians for the best book in American intellectual history, recipient of so many fellowships, Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, National Endowment for the Humanities, and the National Academy of Education. Currently a member of America 250, which is the national commission in charge of planning the celebration of our nation's 250th birthday in the coming year. We are absolutely thrilled to have you. You are a guest speaker earlier today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm happy to be with you.
You gave a great talk, and
thank you.
There is a wellspring of questions. Tell me before we get into the topic of the talk that you gave. What do you think about celebrating a free speech week on public university campuses?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. And it mostly, if you do it in a way that promotes people's reflection on what it means to be for free speech, a lot of times it means that the the most annoying people around you, you have to be reminded that they have the right to state their views, although they don't have the right to state them in any way that they want to, at any time that they want to, and all of those board boundaries and provisos. But yeah, we are a very special kind of community in academic life, because we form wonderful friendships with the people we work with and our students, but there's always that sense that we are accountable to one another through peer review, and accountable ultimately to the truth, to the search for the truth as we know it. And sometimes that means you have to oppose your friends. Sometimes you have to agree with people you otherwise loathe, and that's the nature of the beast. That free speech means that the one person out of 100 who disagrees may be the one who has hold of the truth, and to be reminded of all that, and not kind of go with majority opinion consensus, what AI is telling me is true, and think for yourself and speak for yourself.
So you've taught here and obviously at Hillsdale. So you've taught a number of generations of students, as have I, but you've done it directly in this space. What trend, are there any trend or trends that you find most remarkable about your students and their understanding and application of free speech?
I think, and it's not a good trend. I think, when I started out, I started at Tulane University. I was there for a good long stretch, and I didn't have any trouble getting students to talk in class, to argue with one another. I had gone to a college where this kind of thing was encouraged, and so I sort of knew what I was doing, and I didn't like just giving straight lectures. And over time, I found it more and more difficult to get students to kind of lift their head above the parapet and state their opinions, particularly if they have some way dissenting opinion to what seems to be the trend of the majority. I think there's a more reluctance to get into the sort of rough and tumble of real disagreement, fair fighting, but and I think I wish I could be more positive. I mean, I think there's some ways in which students are better prepared. And here, oh my goodness, I had the shock of a life coming here, and I knew there were good students. Kyle Harper had told me that we had all these National Merit Scholars and so on, but I couldn't believe how good the very best students, who are, of course, in the Classics and Letters program.
Of course.
Where I taught.
And my wife, who's a graduate from Letters, would agree.
I'm sort of tongue-in-cheek there, but
she's not.
But it's true. I had in many classes, I would have students who would double major in Classics and Letters, or just Letters, and petroleum engineering, or one of the more obvious, lucrative fields, meteorology and that kind of thing. It's amazing how many of them wanted to get a piece of Classics and Letters. And so I'd never seen so many students who knew Latin, which I don't, by the way. So they kept me on my toes. So I don't want to sound all negative, but I do think there was a story that maybe I can repeat here just briefly that I told in my talk, that John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. I had the experience of teaching that text. The fellow who introduced me had a similar experience, that students it was a hard text to teach at one time because it all seemed so obviously true.
Everyone simply agreed. It was orthodoxy.
And I had the experience of teaching it to a class that they all said, "What is there to talk about here? It's all obviously true." And then the following week, there was an incident on a college campus in which a speaker was deplatformed, and it got a lot of publicity. And I came to class to ask students what they thought about this, and they were very quiet. And then finally, one of them said, "Well, I think if they thought that there was the possibility a lot of people would disagree with the speaker, they shouldn't have invited him." And I was stunned. And I kind of went around the room and asked others. And then finally, there was one student who was my favorite student in the class who said, "All right, this is contradictory." And, we were actually afraid to express our opinions. We don't see that there's anything in us in it for us to take that kind of chance. And then we had a great discussion because she'd broken the bubble. So I think that there's a lot of, you hear a lot of very loose talk about safety and this sort of thing. But I think that the notion that this is a place safe place to express all kinds of opinions is something we need to work on.
Yeah.
And
it's happened recently, from what you said.
Yes.
You've noticed that.
Oh,
to what do you attribute? I mean, why has it gone from John Stuart Mill being something that everyone agrees with his work on liberty to it being something that results in this stunted, muted conversation?
I don't know, and I think this is something that a lot of people have different opinions about. I mean, I think it obviously has something to do with the advent of social media. It coincides with this around 2015 or so. This just suddenly, my students were getting, it was as if they were hearing a voice from another planet that was really very compelling to them, and they were forming their opinions based on a kind of perceived consensus on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. It was big at that time. You can tell how much into social media I am. I don't even know the names of things, but I could see the effects, and the
effects of polarization and the cementing of that through confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias, absolutely.
Yeah.
So people weren't reading journalists or commentators or scholars who offered completely different opinions, and it was so different when I was in college. I mean, I said something in my talk about what would it be like to be a Marxist or a monarchist or a monk. That was kind of the experience of college I had, this sense of it being an interval in your life in which you can listen all these different approaches.
Is this a threat to democracy?
I think it is. Because I think and I like the term self-government better than democracy, because democracy, the term, means a lot of different things to people. Fair. But to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people, as Lincoln put it. But self-government seems to me to cover it. Really depends on our speaking and our listening. And one of the problems I have I didn't say this in my talk, but I'll say it to you, is that with organizations like FIRE, is that I love what they do. I loved what they did in the past more than what they're doing now. But in protecting people's right to speak, I don't think they give a lot of attention to what I concluded by saying, which was the right to free speech isn't going to mean anything if nobody's listening. So we have to cultivate, and it's not just the obligation to listen. It is a responsibility to listen. We have to be willing to do that. We have to be willing to, yes, argue, but argue fairly, argue within the facts as they're known, try to find a common basis of factual disagreement, and then have out over that. But I also think, just going back to your question about students, I think they personalize things much more than if you disagreed. When I think back to when I was in college, there was a little bit of that. There always is. If somebody's especially vehement, your interpretation of this passage of whatever text is just stupid and wrong, and here's why. Well, that person might be wounded, might be moved to tears or whatever. That could happen. But it didn't happen that much.
Is that because people are now more than ever, is it your perception, that they're wrapping their identity into their political position?
I think that's probably right. Yeah, I think that, or that they don't distinguish between the two, which is a way of saying the same thing, I think. Yeah, but all of their opinions, if you disagree with their opinions about trivial things, well, I really don't like fish tacos. Well, fish tacos are my favorite food. I don't know if I can deal with you. And of course, we all know the stories about people who are dating people and then find out that they're for the other party candidate or whatever. I can't associate with a a Democrat.
So
And I can't
I
associate
hear that
with it,
all the
whatever.
time. Do you hear
Yeah.
that from your
Oh
students?
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I did more here because it's bigger, and in a way more cosmopolitan place than any small liberal arts
But it
college.
really is interesting, this
Yeah.
idea that I couldn't possibly have a mate that has differing political views. I don't think we would have seen that 15 years ago.
Religion is no big deal. You're Jewish, I'm Anglican or Orthodox or Baha'i, whatever, that's
Right.
fine. But different politics, whoa, that's not. We don't. I couldn't live with that. I couldn't live with somebody who who did not see Donald Trump as a maniac or did not see Donald Trump as a God's gift to man, whatever the position may be.
Right, but they're extremes.
Yeah.
It's binary, and there's no middle ground. What do you think the role of universities? And I know you're at Hillsdale, but when you think about the role of a public university, what do you think our role is? The role of universities is, if at all, in addressing what we've discussed. Could be a existential threat to self-governance.
I think it's a complicated answer, and I hope it makes sense. But I think that in some respects we need to be detached. In some respects and look, I don't want to use the term ivory tower. That's not what I have in mind. But there is a kind of both several of the Hofstadter, Oakeshott, people I quoted in my speech are people who see, yes, we can and should have an awareness of, and maybe even a limited engagement with the issues of the day, but that's not our primary purpose. And in fact, it is, Van Woodward said this, but about the university is a place where we can think the unthinkable, contemplate the uncontemplatable, and so on. The things that are beyond the pale and then actually in the news media, if you sort of put it out there without having an adequate basis of debate and research, it's often not a useful thing. We have a kind of, Martin Crow, the sociologist from Berkeley, said that we have a kind of articles of peace, I think he called it, that we have an arrangement with the larger society that we will be a protected place where these kinds of things can be thought about and talked about and written about, and that we're not going to be, part of the bargain is that we're not going to be political actors.
Right.
That we will have that degree of detachment. So I think, on the other hand, and I said this in my talk, I think we can model for the rest of society the way that listening, engaging in conversation about issues of the day instead of screaming matches. And I just, after the talk today, I tried to have that kind of conversation with somebody, and it was sort of fruitless. And this is a man who is passionately convinced that everything he believes is 100% true, and everything that the other side believes is a pack of lies. And it's hard to know. And then everybody on the other side is acting in bad faith. So how do you proceed from that? You have to have, one of the things I said is there are preconditions for free speech to be fruitful. And that's one of them, is you have to credit the humanity and to some extent the rationality of your opponent. And you have to, the concept of the loyal opposition, I think, is we've lost this completely. And it's both parties, I don't think I need to explain that.
But I think this is fascinating, and it's probably something that a lot of people that aren't in universities, they probably don't think about it much, but we think a lot about our role in the classroom. And I think you're spot on, because I've thought deeply about it, both in my role teaching and also as a university president. What is your role? There's an educational component here around civics education, but I've taught since '97 in spaces like these. And to me, I think you never want the students to know what your political
Yeah, no,
affiliation
it's
is.
more fun when they don't,
But
too.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of the process. But I think part of the bargain also is that you've got to start off to the point of I'm 100% wrong and they're 100% right in a political debate. I do think there's a degree of humility that's part of the ground rules where you have to sort of say, I'm not infallible.
I could be wrong.
I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could be. Because if you don't have that, then to your point and to the talk that you gave today and your discussion about speech as a middle ground, but if those ground rules aren't laid out, then no real communication, no real
Yeah.
conversation can take place.
Can I talk to you about the American
Please.
250 Commission? Because this fits right in with what we're talking
Yeah.
about. Because when I came on that group, and it's divided by the permanent members are appointed by they're
You might
some-
remind them what the 250 Commission
Oh
is.
yes, yes. I'm sorry. It is the official name is the Semi-Quincentennial Commission, but nobody can pronounce that. So we've America 250. It's for the celebration, the observance. We don't even agree about that, by the way. I'm not kidding. Of the 250th anniversary of the birth of the United States of America, which really is the promulgation of the Declaration of Independence. So that's what it is, and we've had a very rough time until fairly recently making headway because everybody wants to settle all of the extant issues about this and that. You know, shouldn't we say equity instead of equality? Shouldn't we? Is this? And we spent an entire session, I kid you not, talking about whether or not this should be a celebration, an observance, simply a memorial, or I suggested, I thought kiddingly,
A memorial?
Yes. A wake.
Wow. Didn't see that coming.
No, it was quite a discussion, and I mean, I came out of there realizing we're dealing with a collision of realities here.
Yeah.
That these are not people who are operating in bad faith, but there had to be something that could produce rapprochement. And one of the things that I said repeatedly, and I think it finally got a little bit of traction, is I said, look, this is not the occasion to relitigate every issue in American history and prospective issues in the 250 years to come if we make it that far. This is, and I compared it to a family reunion, that you think of one of these big Southern families that we'll call them the Smiths, and you know they're spread out all over the place, hundreds of them. They've been married, they've been divorced, they've gone through all the changes you can imagine.
Yeah.
They've gone through life,
Right?
Yes. And there are some who are not on speaking terms with the others. There are people with different racial backgrounds. They're all Smiths. And so why do they come to the family reunion if they know they're going to see people they hate, and can't talk to, and they're going to keep on the other side of the room? Because they're all Smiths.
That's right.
That's it. And why can't we begin with that? The realization we are all Americans, and we can love our history, we can loathe our history, we can have lukewarm feelings about our history, we can never have thought about it, but let's recognize that we share that, and begin there, and not not to just for a day, one day, stop litigating the issue, and try to often, the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary. I'm old enough to.
Remember that.
You
I
do?
was there.
Okay. Well,
Absolutely.
I thought you were younger than that. Okay.
That's very kind.
The big event then was something, there were all these efforts to educate people about history. And some of them, the bicentennial minutes were very good. But the big thing, and you remember what it was the tall ships that went into New York Harbor, these old wooden ships, beautiful, magnificent sailing vessels, three-masted, and in perfect condition from all over the world. There were ships from Uruguay, there were ships from India, there were ships from Singapore, all over the world, and a few American ships too. And somehow it was magical.
Yeah.
That the the effect was to draw people out of themselves towards something beautiful, something remote but beautiful. And I had hoped we could come up with something like that. Something
Do we
like,
have that?
No, I haven't given up completely. My idea has always been with something to do with railroads, that because they are so, people are nostalgic for railroads. They were nostalgic for the old ships.
Yeah.
I think nostalgia is not a bad thing.
No. And they allowed us to go west, and they connect us to this day.
That's right. And if you live in my part of the country, your part of the country, you hear them all the time. They're still a part of life in the way that in many other places they aren't.
Well, you've got my vote.
Yeah, okay. Well, good. I'll go back and tell them that.
Let them know that I said this.
The main reason I brought this up is that we have kind of learned to talk to one another in this commission. And we have a remarkable leader, a woman named Rosie Rios, who was very active in Democratic Party politics in California. She's a thorough California person. But I went down to Alabama with her to the 250 dinner down there. And she was, I mean, you would have guessed she'd been born in Alabama. She understood this is bigger than the political ambitions that she undoubtedly has, and I think will achieve. She's very talented. But she knows that first and foremost, she's got to do a good job with this. And that means getting people to talk to one another and not demonize one another, not apply stereotypes. And I can't tell you how many times I've said to my wife, I've had enough of this. I'm not going to another meeting. I'm not going to, and I always get talked out of it by her or by others. And I'm glad I've stuck with it, because I think we're going to do all right.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that have to fall into place, but
isn't it the story of America, though?
Yeah.
This idea that we challenge, we push, we argue, but ultimately we find a common ground, and that's how we've moved forward for the last 250 years.
Oh, I forget who it was that said that Americans, probably Churchill, that Americans can always be counted on to do the right thing after they've exhausted all the other possibilities.
No question. And that's who we are. That sounds like where the commission is.
It is. One other thing, though, and I want to say this for your Oklahoma listeners. I'm told this podcast has millions all over the world, and the ships at sea.
It does. It's now 132 countries.
For Oklahoma listeners, if you're interested in being part of this celebration, I don't mind calling it a celebration.
I think I'll join you.
Contact your local Oklahoma 250 commission, because there is one here, and I can't tell you off the top of my head who runs it. I've met the people, but all the states have these commissions, and that's where a lot of the work is actually being done. As we on the National Commission fight about these issues, and I think maybe don't always use our time as wisely as we might, they're going ahead and doing it. And that's the story of America, too, that local initiatives, or just people, individuals, groups, whether they're associated with a political body or with some cause or whatever, they're the ones that make things happen. They're the ones that produce change. It's federalism.
It is.
It's the larger principle of federalism.
It is. So turns out states matter.
It does. They matter, and local governments matter, and regions matter, and all the other ways that we organize ourselves.
Well, thank you. You're a force of good, and from Tulane to Hillsdale, you're still one of ours, and we are really grateful that you came back.
I got to tell you, I have a heavy heart over the Texas game, even now.
Well, I think we all know if our quarterback had been healthy.
Well,
I don't want to get petty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I used to be a fan of the New Orleans Saints, and you remember the coulda, woulda, shoulda. Was the
right.
But we follow the Sooners.
Well, we appreciate it, and they're doing well.
Yeah.
We're gonna hope they keep going well.
This really could be. It's too bad about Texas, but you shouldn't give up hope.
No. These days, there's enough parity where you can lose one or two.
And Texas is a beautiful state for the 250,000 listeners we have and actually it is what 40% of the student body.
40% of the student body,
mainly
Texas.
North Texas.
Yeah.
So, maybe someday we can annex that part of
I think the
Texas.
fact that we get along once a year in a stadium proves that anything can be done in America.
Yes, right.
I think that's it. Hey, thank you so much, Professor. And
Thank
thanks to
you.
all of the listeners for joining us. And we will hopefully have you join us for the next Conversations with the President. Hey, thank you for joining this episode of Conversations with the President. And before you go, do not forget, we need your input for Hey Harroz. Please go to link.ou.edu/Hey Harroz to submit your questions. Thanks a lot. Until next time, this is Conversations with the President.